March 3, 1945. 0500 hours. Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands. Sergeant William Harrell lies in a narrow foxhole on a ridge overlooking a ravine. The darkness is absolute. Sulfur stench fills the air. The volcanic rock beneath him still radiates warmth from the geothermal vents that honeycomb this island. Beyond the ridge, somewhere in that black void, Japanese soldiers are moving. He can hear them. The scrape of boots on volcanic rock. The clink of metal against metal. Whispered commands in a language he does not understand. His foxhole mate, Private First Class Andrew Carter, taps his shoulder. Enemy incoming. Harrell opens his eyes. A star shell bursts overhead, bathing the landscape in ghostly white light. In that frozen instant he sees them. Japanese soldiers pouring out of the ravine like shadows given form. 12 of them, maybe more, moving fast toward the American lines. He raises his carbine and fires. 2 of them drop. Carter fires 2, killing 4 more. Then Carter's rifle jams. Harrell orders Carter to the command post to get another weapon. He will hold the position alone. What happens over the next hour will cost William Harrell both of his hands. It will leave him bleeding out in a foxhole surrounded by enemy dead, and it will earn him the Medal of Honor for one of the most savage acts of close combat in the history of the United States Marine Corps. When dawn breaks over Iwo Jima, stretcher-bearers will find Sergeant Harrell still alive. Barely. His left hand is gone, torn off by a grenade. His right hand is gone too, destroyed when he pushed a live grenade into the face of an enemy soldier. His thigh is shattered. Saber wounds crisscross his legs where a Japanese officer slashed him with a samurai sword. And around his foxhole lie the bodies of 12 Japanese soldiers, at least 5 of them killed by Harrell himself, after he had already lost his first hand. This is the story of a young man from the Texas borderlands who was rejected by the Army Air Corps twice and rejected by the Navy once, all because of colorblindness. A man who was told he could not fight. A man who refused to accept that verdict. A man who went on to become one of the most decorated Marines of World War II. And a man who, on one terrible night on a volcanic island in the Pacific, refused to die no matter what the enemy took from him. William George Harrell was born on June 26, 1922, in Rio Grande City, Texas. The town sits on the northern banks of the Rio Grande River, 8 miles from the Mexican border. In 1922, this was still frontier country. Lawless in places, violent in others. Smugglers crossed the river at night. Bandits raided ranches. Federal agents patrolled the borderlands with pistols on their hips and rifles in their saddles. The kind of land that bred a certain type of man. Hard men. Quiet men. Men who did not talk much, but acted when action was required. His father, Roy Eugene Harrell, was exactly that type. Born in 1892 in Muskogee, Indian Territory, what would later become Oklahoma. Roy moved to Texas when he was 17 years old and found work as a ranch hand near the town of Alice. He learned to ride horses. He learned to shoot. He learned the unforgiving landscape of South Texas, where the summer heat could kill you as easily as any bandit. When the United States entered World War I, Roy Harrell joined the Army Cavalry. He served about 6 months before the armistice was signed in November 1918. By then he was already married with 1 son, Dick, William's older brother. After the war, Roy Harrell came home to Texas. He needed work. He needed to support his growing family. According to some accounts, he briefly served as a Texas Ranger, the legendary law enforcement agency that had been keeping order in Texas since 1823. But being a ranger did not pay well. Roy Harrell had a family to feed, so he quit to become a United States Border Patrol officer, where the salary was better and the work was just as dangerous. Maybe more dangerous. The Border Patrol was new then, established only in 1924. Its agents were tasked with controlling illegal immigration and smuggling along the Mexican border. In the 1920s, that meant confronting armed criminals on a regular basis. Roy Harrell had a reputation along the Texas border. The newspapers called him a man who civilized the frontier. What that meant in practice was gunfights. Life-and-death confrontations where hesitation meant a bullet in your chest. One newspaper story from the 1920s tells the tale. A murder suspect named Guadalupe Garcia had killed a local constable named Slim Billings. Garcia was spotted fleeing between towns. Border Patrol Officer Roy Harrell, operating out of headquarters in Mercedes, intercepted him somewhere on the road. Harrell called for Garcia to stop. The suspect opened fire. Roy Harrell returned fire. When the shooting stopped, Garcia was dead with 6 bullet wounds. The lawman was unhurt. Young William grew up in that world. He absorbed his father's courage the way children absorb everything from their parents, through observation, through osmosis, through the daily example of a father who strapped on a pistol every morning and rode off to face men who would kill him if they could. He learned that courage was not something you talked about. It was something you demonstrated through action when action was required. Then, in 1931, Roy Harrell died. William was 9 years old. His mother, Hazel Marion Harrell, born Hazel Culver, was left to raise 3 children alone. William, his older brother Dick, and his older sister Virginia. Hazel Harrell was a strong woman. She had to be. Widowed with 3 children in the depths of the Great Depression, she did what needed to be done. She moved the family about an hour east to Mercedes, Texas, a small town in the Rio Grande Valley, working class, agricultural, tight-knit, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody else's business and neighbors helped neighbors through hard times. William Harrell grew up in Mercedes without a father, but not without role models. The memory of Roy Harrell loomed large. The stories of his courage on the border, the quiet example of a man who did his duty without complaint. William carried that legacy with him even as a boy. He became a Boy Scout. He developed a love of horses, inherited from his father. He learned to hunt and camp in the South Texas brush country. He spent summers working on ranches, learning the land, building the kind of quiet toughness that defined men of that era and that region. He worked hard. He did not complain. He saved what money he could. Harrell graduated from Mercedes High School in 1939. 17 years old, ready for whatever came next, the world was changing around him. In September of that year, Germany invaded Poland. World War II had begun in Europe. America was still at peace, still clinging to neutrality, but everyone could feel the storm approaching. What came next for William Harrell was Texas A&M University. He enrolled in September 1939. Arriving at the campus in College Station just as the news from Europe grew darker by the day. He chose animal husbandry as his major because he was interested in the scientific breeding of cattle and horses. This was practical education for a young man from ranch country. He imagined a future working the land, improving livestock, building something lasting. For his military science requirement mandatory at Texas A&M, he selected the cavalry. Of course he did. His father had been cavalry. Horses were in his blood. He learned to ride in formation. He learned military discipline. He wore the uniform with pride. Harrell stayed at Texas A&M for 4 semesters, 2 years. He was not wealthy. An aunt helped with some expenses, but Harrell understood that he had to finance his own education. College was expensive. Money was tight. In the spring of 1941, he made a practical decision. He would leave school, work for a while, save money, and return to finish his degree later. He never finished that degree. History intervened. December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. More than 2,000 Americans died that Sunday morning. The Pacific Fleet was crippled, and the United States of America went to war. Young men across the country were lining up at recruiting stations before the smoke had cleared over Hawaii. William Harrell was among them. He wanted to fight. He wanted to fly. He imagined himself in the cockpit of a fighter plane, defending his country in the skies over the Pacific. He went to the United States Army Air Corps recruiting office. He filled out the paperwork. He took the physical examination. They rejected him. Colorblindness. Pilots needed to see signal lights and identify colored markers. A man who could not distinguish certain colors could not fly combat aircraft. Sorry, son. Find another way to serve. Harrell did not give up. He tried again, went through the whole process a second time. Rejected again. Same reason, colorblindness. He went to the Navy. Maybe he could serve on a ship. Maybe he could fight at sea. They gave him a physical. They tested his eyes. Rejected. Colorblindness. At this point, most men would have accepted the verdict. The message was clear. You have a medical condition that disqualifies you from combat service. Go home. Find a civilian job. Support the war effort from the home front. Leave the fighting to others. William Harrell was not most men. He went to the Marine Corps recruiting office. The Marines had a reputation for taking men that other branches passed over, tougher in some ways, more willing to give a determined man a chance. On July 3, 1942, in Harlingen, Texas, the Marines said yes. Maybe they needed more men as the war expanded. Maybe the recruiter looked at this determined young Texan with ranch hands and cavalry training and decided colorblindness did not matter as much as heart. Maybe Harrell simply impressed them with his persistence after being turned away by everyone else. What matters is what happened next. Private William Harrell reported to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, California, boot camp. 13 weeks of physical and mental punishment designed to transform civilians into Marines, running in the California sun until your lungs burned, marching until your feet bled, drilling until every movement became automatic. Combat training that taught you 100 ways to kill and 1,000 ways to stay alive. The drill instructors broke you down. They stripped away your civilian identity. They rebuilt you as a Marine, part of a unit, part of a brotherhood, part of a weapon aimed at the enemies of the United States. Harrell made it through, many did not. The washout rate was significant. Men who could not handle the physical demands. Men who could not handle the mental pressure. Men who simply were not cut out for what the Marine Corps required. William Harrell was cut out for it. He had been prepared for this his whole life without knowing it, the discipline of working ranches. The toughness bred into him by the South Texas landscape. The legacy of a father who had faced armed criminals without flinching. All of it came together in those 13 weeks. He was assigned to headquarters and service company at Camp Elliott in San Diego, promoted to private first class, then to corporal. He completed the basic rocket course, training as an armorer, the man who maintains and repairs the weapons that keep Marines alive, a technical job. An important job, not the glamorous combat role he had imagined when he dreamed of flying fighter planes, but essential nonetheless. In early 1944, Corporal Harrell was assigned to Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division. He shipped out to Hawaii, where the division would train for the amphibious assaults that would carry the war to Japan's doorstep. The 5th Marine Division was new, activated in November 1943 at Camp Pendleton, California. Unlike the 3rd and 4th Marine Divisions, which had already seen combat in the brutal island-hopping campaigns across the Pacific, the 5th was untested, green, full of young men who had trained for war but never experienced it, who had practiced beach landings on California shores but never faced enemy fire as they hit the sand. Harrell spent about a year in the Pacific preparing for combat, first in Hawaii, then in Saipan, where the division conducted final training exercises. He was promoted to sergeant. He became a leader of an assault group. The responsibility weighed on him. Men would look to him for guidance in combat. Their lives would depend on his decisions. By early 1945, the 5th Marine Division was ready. Their target was a volcanic island called Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima. The name means Sulphur Island in Japanese. A volcanic rock, roughly 8 square miles in total area, shaped like a pork chop, located approximately 660 miles south of Tokyo. The island had 2 airfields that the Japanese used to launch interceptor attacks against American B-29 bombers striking the Japanese home islands. Capturing Iwo Jima would eliminate that threat and provide an emergency landing strip for damaged bombers returning from missions over Japan. The strategic importance was clear. The difficulty of capturing it was equally clear. Lieutenant General Tamichi Kuribayashi commanded the Japanese garrison. Approximately 21,000 soldiers dug into fortifications that had been under construction for months. Kuribayashi was not an ordinary commander. He had traveled extensively before the war. He had served as a military attaché in the United States. He understood Americans. He respected their industrial power and their fighting spirit, and he knew how to make them pay for every inch of ground. Kuribayashi abandoned the traditional Japanese doctrine of defending at the waterline and launching banzai charges against enemy positions. He had studied the failures of other Japanese commanders in the Pacific. He knew that frontal assaults against American firepower were suicide. So he changed the strategy entirely. He ordered his men to dig. They carved 18 kilometers of tunnels into the volcanic rock. They built bunkers with interlocking fields of fire. They created hidden artillery positions that could not be seen from the air or the sea. They connected defensive positions with underground passages so troops could appear, attack, and vanish back into the earth. They stockpiled ammunition and supplies for a prolonged siege. Kuribayashi told his men they would not survive. He told them their mission was not to win, but to make the Americans bleed, to kill as many of the enemy as possible, to delay the American advance toward Japan. Every day they held out was a day that Japan's leaders could use to prepare defenses on the home islands. The Japanese defenders on Iwo Jima were not expecting to go home. They were expecting to die, and they intended to take as many Americans with them as possible. February 19, 1945, D-Day on Iwo Jima. The invasion force included approximately 70,000 Marines from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions, the largest amphibious assault in the Pacific theater. Sergeant William Harrell and the 28th Marines landed on the southern beaches in the early morning hours. The 5th Division's mission was to isolate and capture Mount Suribachi, the 554-foot volcanic cone that dominated the southern tip of the island. From Suribachi's summit, Japanese observers could direct artillery fire onto the entire landing beach. Until the mountain was taken, no Marine on Iwo Jima would be safe. The landing itself was chaos. The beaches were not sandy beaches like those in California, where the Marines had trained. They were covered with black volcanic ash, fine and loose and treacherous. Men sank to their knees. Vehicles bogged down. Equipment disappeared into the soft ground. Heavy surf capsized landing craft. Marines drowned in the water, dragged down by their heavy packs and weapons. Those who made it to shore faced the ash. Those who made it past the ash faced the Japanese. Kuribayashi had let the first waves land almost unopposed. He wanted the beaches crowded with men and equipment before he unleashed his hidden artillery. When the barrage began, the beaches became killing fields. Shells exploded among the packed Marines. Men died in the sand. Men died in the water. Men died trying to dig foxholes in volcanic ash that collapsed as fast as they could shovel. The 5th Division pushed forward anyway. Slowly. Brutally. Yard by yard. Fighting through terrain that seemed designed for defense. Ravines that provided cover for Japanese snipers. Caves that disgorged enemy soldiers. Bunkers that had to be taken one by one with grenades and flamethrowers. On February 23, 4 days after the landing, a patrol from the 28th Marines reached the summit of Mount Suribachi. They raised a small American flag. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal was on the beach below. He saw the flag go up and decided he wanted it as a souvenir, so another group was sent up with a larger flag. An Associated Press photographer named Joe Rosenthal captured the moment when 6 men struggled to raise the replacement flag in the stiff wind. That photograph became one of the most iconic images of World War II. 3 of the 6 men in that photograph were killed on Iwo Jima before the battle ended. The flag raising was a symbol of American determination. But it was not the end of the battle. Not even close. The fighting on Iwo Jima would continue for 36 days. The Marines pushed north across the island, clearing the fortified positions that Kuribayashi had constructed. Every hill was a fortress. Every ravine was an ambush. Every cave had to be sealed with explosives or cleared with flamethrowers. The casualties were staggering. Nearly 7,000 Marines killed. More than 20,000 wounded. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 would be captured alive. The rest died fighting or took their own lives rather than surrender. Iwo Jima was the only battle in the Pacific where American casualties exceeded Japanese casualties. It produced 27 Medal of Honor recipients, the highest number for any single battle in American history. The valor shown was extraordinary. The suffering was immense. By early March, the Marines had secured the southern part of the island and were pushing toward the northern shores. The terrain in the north was even more nightmarish than the south. Broken ground, hidden caves, Japanese soldiers who emerged from nowhere, attacked, and vanished back underground. Night infiltrations were constant. Small groups of Japanese would slip through American lines in the darkness and attack command posts, supply dumps, and sleeping Marines. March 2, 1945. Sergeant William Harrell and his assault group had been fighting for nearly 2 weeks. They had taken casualties. They had killed many Japanese. They had advanced through terrain that seemed designed by some malevolent architect for the specific purpose of killing Marines. That evening, Harrell and Private First Class Andrew Carter Jr. dug a 2-man foxhole on a small ridge. Carter was a fellow Texan from the town of Paducah. The 2 men had fought side by side through the worst of the campaign. They trusted each other with their lives. In combat, that trust is everything. Their position was about 20 yards forward of the company command post, overlooking a ravine that descended into Japanese-held territory. It was an exposed position. Dangerous. The kind of place where the enemy would come if they tried to infiltrate the American lines. But somebody had to hold it. Somebody had to provide early warning if the Japanese attacked from that direction. Harrell and Carter settled in for the night. They would take turns on watch. 1 hour on, 1 hour off. One man awake and alert while the other slept. This was standard procedure in combat. You could not stay awake forever. Your body would not allow it. You had to trust your foxhole mate with your life. The night was dark. The sulfur smell was constant. The volcanic rock radiated warmth from below while the night air carried the Pacific chill. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled. Flares burst occasionally, casting long shadows across the broken ground. Around 0500 hours on March 3, in that dead time before dawn when the human body is at its lowest ebb, Carter shook Harrell awake. Movement in the ravine. Harrell came instantly alert. A star shell burst overhead, launched by American forces to illuminate the area. The landscape was suddenly bathed in harsh white light, every rock and shadow visible in stark detail. And there they were, Japanese soldiers emerging from the ravine, 12 of them at least, moving fast toward the American lines. Harrell raised his carbine and fired. 2 Japanese soldiers fell. Carter fired too, his rifle cracking in the cold air. 4 more enemy soldiers went down. But then Carter's weapon jammed. This was the nightmare scenario. A malfunction at the worst possible moment. The bolt would not cycle. The weapon was useless. Carter needed to get to the command post, get another rifle, and get back. Every second counted. Harrell made a decision. He ordered Carter to go, get another weapon. He would hold the position alone. Carter hesitated. Leaving his sergeant alone against an unknown number of enemy soldiers went against every instinct. But Harrell outranked him, and they needed another rifle. Carter ran into the darkness toward the command post. Harrell kept firing. But he was one man with 1 carbine against Japanese soldiers who kept coming. A grenade came sailing through the darkness and landed in the foxhole. Harrell reacted on instinct. Pure muscle memory from months of training. He tried to throw it back. But grenades do not give you much time. 3 seconds. 4 at most. The fuse was already burning. The grenade exploded. The blast tore off Harrell's left hand and fractured his thigh. Shrapnel ripped into his body. The pain must have been beyond anything he had ever experienced. Beyond description. His hand was gone. Just gone. Blood was pouring from the stump. His leg was shattered, the bone broken by the concussive force. Most men would have been done at that point. Most men would have collapsed into shock, would have bled out in that foxhole, would have died before help could arrive. William Harrell kept fighting. He did not have his left hand anymore, but he had his right hand. He still had his carbine. The weapon still worked. He forced himself through the pain. Forced himself to raise the rifle with one arm, forced himself to keep shooting at the shapes, moving toward him in the flickering light of the star shells. Carter came running back with a new rifle. He slid into the foxhole and saw his sergeant covered in blood, left hand gone, but still fighting. Together the two Marines engaged the next wave of attackers. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. Brass casings tumbled into the volcanic ash. Japanese soldiers fell. Then a Japanese officer charged the foxhole with a drawn samurai sword. The blade gleamed in the light of another star shell. Carter raised his rifle. The officer swung the sword. It sliced Carter's hand open before either Marine could fire. Harrell could not reload his carbine with one hand, but he had a pistol. He drew it with his right hand and shot the Japanese officer dead. Carter was now wounded too, bleeding badly from the sword wound. His hand was laid open. He was losing blood fast. Harrell looked at his foxhole mate and made a decision. Carter was going to die if he stayed here. The wound was severe. He needed medical attention. Harrell ordered him to go back to the command post to get help, to save himself. Carter refused. He did not want to leave his sergeant. Harrell insisted. He believed he was dying, the blood loss from his shattered hand and fractured leg, the shock that should have killed him already. He did not want Carter to die too. He did not want his friend to bleed out in this foxhole when he could still make it to safety. Go, he told Carter. That is an order. Save yourself. Carter funnily laughed, but he did not go to save himself. He went to get another rifle and stretcher bearers. He intended to come back. While Carter was gone, the fighting continued. Two more Japanese soldiers appeared at the edge of the foxhole. One of them had a grenade in his hand. The soldier threw the grenade. It landed right next to Harrell's head. What William Harrell did next defies any rational explanation. He was already missing his left hand. His leg was shattered. He had been fighting and bleeding for what felt like hours. He was alone in a foxhole, surrounded by enemy dead, with more enemies coming. The grenade lay there, fuse burning. He had one hand left, one good hand, his right hand. If he did nothing, the grenade would explode and he would die. Harrell grabbed the grenade with his right hand, his only remaining hand, and he pushed it toward the Japanese soldier crouching at the edge of his foxhole. The grenade exploded. It killed the Japanese soldier, and it tore off William Harrell's right hand. Now he had no hands at all. Both gone, destroyed by grenades within minutes of each other. He was bleeding from multiple wounds. He had no way to hold a weapon, no way to reload, no way to pull a trigger, no way to defend himself. He should have died. There is no medical or logical explanation for why he did not. Blood loss alone should have killed him. Shock should have killed him. The sheer trauma of losing both hands in close combat should have shut his body down. Somehow, William Harrell did not die. Carter returned with another weapon and stayed at his side through the rest of the night, fighting off any remaining threats, keeping pressure on Harrell's wounds, waiting for dawn when the stretcher bearers could reach them. When the sun finally rose over Iwo Jima on March 3, 1945, the stretcher bearers found Sergeant Harrell still alive, barely conscious, both hands destroyed. Surrounded by the bodies of 12 dead Japanese soldiers, his commander would later call the position the two-man Alamo. Harrell was evacuated from Iwo Jima and transported through a series of field hospitals, first to a medical station on the island itself, then to a naval hospital at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, finally to Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland, where he would spend months recovering. How he survived the massive blood loss and trauma remains difficult to explain. Sheer willpower may have played a role. Whatever the reason, William Harrell lived when by all rights he should have died. Private First Class Andrew Jackson Carter, Jr. was awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor in the United States Naval Service, just below the Medal of Honor. The citation noted his extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty. He had killed at least 4 Japanese soldiers during the night attack, and had remained with Harrell through the worst of the fighting despite his own serious wounds. Carter kept the Japanese officer's samurai sword. He held onto it for years, intending to give it to Harrell when they met again. That sword is now displayed alongside Harrell's Medal of Honor at Texas A&M University. For Sergeant William George Harrell, the recommendation went to the highest level. The Medal of Honor, the nation's supreme military decoration. The official citation reads in part, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty as leader of an assault group attached to the 1st Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division, during hand-to-hand combat with enemy Japanese at Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands, on March 3, 1945. The citation describes the battle in detail. How Harrell held his position alone while Carter went for another rifle. How he kept fighting after the first grenade destroyed his left hand. How he drew his pistol and killed the sword-wielding Japanese officer. How he ordered Carter to safety. And how, in the final act of the fight, he grasped a live grenade with his only remaining hand and pushed it toward the enemy, sacrificing that hand to kill his attacker. His grim fortitude, the citation concludes, exceptional valor, and indomitable fighting spirit against almost insurmountable odds reflect the highest credit upon himself and enhance the finest traditions of the United States Naval Service. October of 1945, the White House. President Harry S. Truman stood on the South Lawn with 14 Marines and Navy corpsmen who had earned the Medal of Honor on Iwo Jima. William Harrell was one of them. Truman placed the blue ribbon around Harrell's neck. The medal hung over his heart. A photograph from that day shows the president reaching toward one of the prosthetic hooks that had replaced Harrell's hands. Truman's expression is solemn, reverent. He understood what he was looking at. Truman had a famous quote about the Medal of Honor. He said on multiple occasions that he would rather have that medal than be President of the United States. He meant it. The medal represents something beyond politics or power, something that cannot be achieved through ambition or wealth or connections. It represents courage, the willingness to face certain death and keep fighting, the refusal to surrender when surrender would be the rational choice, the decision to sacrifice everything, including your own body, for your fellow soldiers and your country. Sergeant Harrell was discharged from the Marine Corps in February 1946. His wounds had healed as much as they ever would. Both hands were gone forever, replaced by prosthetic hooks. His family later said he adapted to them brilliantly, learned to do almost everything that other men did with their hands, refused to let his disability define him. He returned to Mercedes, Texas, a hero. The town turned out to welcome him home. The local Kiwanis Club and several other organizations raised $25,000 to help him buy a ranch, a substantial sum in 1946. A sign of how much his community valued what he had given. But Harrell did not become a rancher. He took a different path. He got a job with the Veterans Administration, the massive federal bureaucracy responsible for helping America's former soldiers navigate the transition back to civilian life. He became a contact representative working specifically with other amputees, men who had lost arms or legs or hands in the war, men who were struggling to adapt to lives that had been forever changed by combat, men who needed someone who understood what they were going through. Who better to help them than a man who had lost both hands and refused to quit? Harrell moved to San Antonio, Texas, and bought a home. He married. His first marriage ended in divorce. In 1951, he married again to a woman named Olive Cortez. They had 2 children, Christy Lee and Gary Douglas. He was promoted over the years at the Veterans Administration. He became chief of the prosthetic appliance group at the San Antonio office. He worked with disabled veterans every day. He spoke at events on their behalf. He became an advocate for those who had given parts of themselves in service to their country. The Medal of Honor and his other decorations hung somewhere in his home. He did not talk about them much. When people asked about Iwo Jima, about the foxhole, about the grenades, he deflected. He had done what he had to do. That was all. William George Harrell died on August 9, 1964. He was 42 years old. They buried him with full military honors at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in San Antonio, among the graves of other veterans who had served their country across the generation. The legacy he left behind extends far beyond that grave. Texas A&M University named a dormitory after him. William G. Harrell Hall, his Medal of Honor, and other awards are on permanent display at the Sam Houston Sanders Corps of Cadets Center on campus. A bronze plaque shows his military portrait. The Japanese officer's sword that Carter kept for him is displayed alongside the medal. In Mercedes, the town where he grew up, a section of the granite All Wars Memorial is dedicated to him. The high school's junior ROTC building bears his name. In 2015, the town renamed a middle school in his honor, William George Harrell Middle School. Children walk through those halls every day, most of them probably unaware of the full story of the man whose name is on the building. The Battle of Iwo Jima produced 27 Medal of Honor recipients, the highest number for any single battle in American history. Most people cannot name any of them. The battle itself is remembered primarily for the flag-raising photograph, for the image of 6 men planting the stars and stripes on top of Mount Suribachi. But the real story of Iwo Jima is not in that photograph. The real story is in the foxholes, and the ravines, and the tunnels. In the close-quarters combat that raged for 36 days. In the nearly 7,000 Marines who died taking an 8-square-mile volcanic rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. In the men who kept fighting when fighting should have been impossible. Men like William Harrell, who refused to stop even when his body was destroyed, who pushed a grenade into the face of his enemy with the last hand he had, who survived against odds that should have been impossible and spent the rest of his life helping other wounded veterans find their way forward. There is a question that people ask about Medal of Honor recipients. What makes them different? What separates the men and women who earn that medal from everyone else? Is it training? Is it instinct? Is it something they were born with? The answer is that there is no single answer. Medal of Honor recipients come from every background, every region, every walk of life. Some are large and powerful. Some are small and unassuming. Some are highly educated. Some never finished high school. Some planned their heroic actions with careful calculation. Others acted on pure reflex in a fraction of a second. What they share is a moment when everything else falls away, when fear and pain and self-preservation and rational calculation all disappear. And what remains is something simpler and harder to explain. The decision to keep fighting when fighting should be impossible. William Harrell made that decision in a foxhole on Iwo Jima. He made it when the first grenade took his left hand. He made it again when he drew his pistol and killed the officer with the sword. He made it a third time when he grabbed a live grenade with his only remaining hand and used it to destroy his enemy. 3 times he could have stopped. 3 times he could have collapsed into shock and waited for death. 3 times he chose to fight instead. His father, Roy Harrell, had been a man who faced armed criminals on the Texas border with nothing but courage and a pistol. His son did the same thing on a volcanic island 6,000 miles from home. The setting was different, the enemy was different, but the core quality was identical. The refusal to surrender, the determination to keep fighting until the fighting was done. That quality passed from father to son like an inheritance more valuable than money or land. It cannot be taught in schools. It cannot be learned from books. It can only be absorbed through example and activated in crisis. March 3, 1945, 0500 hours. Iwo Jima Volcano Islands. A 22-year-old sergeant from Mercedes, Texas, lies in a foxhole on a ridge overlooking a ravine. His foxhole mate has just shaken him awake. Enemy incoming. A star shell bursts overhead. In the white light, he sees them, Japanese soldiers pouring out of the darkness. He raises his carbine. He fires. He does not know what the next hour will bring. He does not know that he will lose both hands. He does not know that he will push a grenade into a man's face with his last remaining fingers. He does not know that he will survive when survival seems impossible. All he knows is that the enemy is coming and his position must be held. So Sergeant William George Harrell does what his father taught him without ever saying a word. He fights. And when they take his left hand, he keeps fighting. And when they take his right hand, he keeps fighting. And when dawn breaks over Iwo Jima and the stretcher bearers find him surrounded by 12 dead Japanese soldiers, both hands gone, covered in blood, he is still alive, still breathing, still refusing to quit. Because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is what you do when you have lost everything except the will to keep going. And William Harrell, the quiet kid from the Texas borderlands who wanted to fly planes but could not see colors correctly, who was rejected 3 times before the Marines finally took him in, had more of that courage than almost anyone who has ever lived. That is the story worth remembering. Not the photograph of the flag on Mount Suribachi, not the statistics of casualties and territory gained, but the story of one man in one foxhole who gave everything he had and then found a way to give more. 2 hands. That is what William Harrell gave to his country on a volcanic island in the Pacific. 2 hands and everything they represented, the ability to hold a weapon, the ability to embrace his family, the ability to do 1,000 ordinary things that most of us never think about until they are gone. He gave all of that. And in return, he received a medal on a blue ribbon and a place in history among the bravest men and women this nation has ever produced. The Medal of Honor is awarded for actions above and beyond the call of duty. William Harrell earned it not by doing one impossible thing, but by doing impossible things over and over again in the space of a single hour. Each time the enemy took something from him, he found another way to fight. Each time his body failed him, his spirit refused to follow, and that refusal to die, that determination to keep fighting no matter the cost, is what the Medal of Honor truly represents. Every year, fewer and fewer Americans can tell you what happened on Iwo Jima. The veterans who fought there have almost all passed away. The battle fades into history books and documentaries that most people never read or watch. The names of the dead become just names, carved on memorials that tourists photograph without understanding. But the lessons of Iwo Jima endure. The lessons of men like William Harrell endure. They teach us that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things when the moment demands it. That courage is not about size or strength or special training, but about the decision you make when everything is falling apart around you. And when the moment came that tested everything Harrell was, he proved that every recruiter who had said no to him had been wrong. He could fight. He could serve. He could give more for his country than almost anyone in the history of American warfare. The next time you read about the flag raising on Iwo Jima, remember that the real story is not in that photograph. The real story is in a foxhole on a ridge, overlooking a ravine, where a young man from Texas lost both his hands and still refused to die. Remember William George Harrell. Remember what he gave, remember what he represents, and remember that somewhere inside each of us, there is the potential for that same courage. We may never be tested the way he was tested. We may never face grenades and swords and enemy soldiers in the darkness before dawn. But we all face moments that demand more than we think we can give. In those moments, we can choose to quit, or we can choose to keep fighting. William Harrell showed us which choice leads to honor.